The Friday dungeon truly starts fresh, unlike any other place he had seen in its history. Jin Woo found himself battling a storm of monsters, but he didn't fight them. Instead, he raced toward victory using only his raw speed, lightning-fast timing, and flawless moves. When the timer hits 0, he drops into the air to call his friend over for a burst of speed and shoots down the racetrack like a bullet. Jin Woo moves with such grace that even if bullets shoot off her head in all directions, she never lets go of the air and stays frozen in place. Once a blank game stage, this scene turned into an adventure where he ran it on his own, making the excitement feel even more thrilling. Then right when it looked suspicious like he was driving straight down the road, Jin Woo suddenly popped up and pointed out a secret tunnel that no one else could see. A summoned dolphin leapt out of the waterway and slipped through the traps below before switching his wings and soaring effortlessly above the final obstacles. The blink of an eye saw Jin Woo sprinting toward the finish line and prove once again why he is the best. Jin Woo spent 10 years fighting alone to defeat a boss named Battle of Summoners, and it was only because his goal was simple that he could clear this dungeon easily today. He turned the trash into his kingdom, turning everyone else's dead games into his own, and became a legendary figure called Jinyagod while nobody else saw what was happening. The day his dream of flying landed in reality, Jin Woo looked at the empty room on the 100th floor and realized that quitting meant being completely normal again. And when that glorious moment finally arrived, everything seemed to shift instantly. A massive blue billboard popped up in the dark night sky as the sun began its slow, gentle rise over the mountains. A wall of ancient scrolls began to rain down as the dark swallowed everything, sending a shiver through the room. Before Jin Woo had time to even catch his breath after losing everything, Trun slammed him into the dirt and knocked him out in one stroke. 3 years have now passed as the world began to change when he finally woke up. A new era of adventure has finally arrived, and everyone is shouting after that legendary hero who saved the day on his last stand. Now, the young warrior Jin Woo stands alone among the cheering crowd, knowing that to win this endless fight, he must soar higher and prove he's not just another shadowy figure in this brand new world where shadows move faster than light. After Jin Woo steps out of the hospital's ward and lands on his couch at home, he starts diving into a wild quest to uncover how the entire world has changed since his last visit. Basically, every single game system has turned into real life. Whether it's a match between you and your friends, a raid that shakes out on the floor, deep dives in dungeons, or even that special tower called the Tower of Trials. 30 years after the summoners started fading away, every single person in the world has slowly adjusted their lives to live next to them. Even if Jin Woo thinks the others aren't quite so skilled after all, she still stands firm in her opinion of him. He was about to accept a surprise gift when the game's opening sequence began immediately after. When Jin Woo stepped out into that empty spot after the tutorial, the door opened and something scary jumped from nowhere. Something like a ghost, or the summoning magic felt too wild for him to handle. So he had to stay very still and watch carefully as it moved through the air. Jin Woo stepped out of the shadow to see a shiny new scroll in his palm, feeling like he had just been told by an old teacher to leave the classroom and go into the real world instead. At this point, he can only pray that it is decent, because if he started with trash tier summons, he'd be pretty screwed. Even so, he's worried since the game hates drop rates. There's a 1% chance of drawing an E rank summon and a 5% chance for F rank, while F ranks hold up 94%. Before tearing the scroll, Jin Woo starts begging all the gods that he serves, hoping to get something really good. Oh, he's actually all set up for a real E rank summon, if the move really makes sense for him right now. As Jin tore open the scroll and watched, a sudden flash of brilliance shattered the air before they even knew it was happening. A shimmering magic circle pops onto the earth, and suddenly, a figure leaps out of it. It was a spell called Summon Wind that turned out to have been a rare rank, 6 summoner. It's completely bewildering for Jin Woo, since nobody seems to understand why any rank of that level would actually be there in the first place. It turns out the fairy didn't even realize what was happening when she spotted Jin Woo standing right next to her. The door slammed behind her, as if the whole house had been standing by and waiting for someone else to come back. Even Jin Woo was completely stunned when the summoner started speaking again. Finally, Jin Woo grinds his teeth and stirs up a quiet moment when he asks the fairy if she's even Ramba. The little girl answered with a cheerful laugh, knowing she knew exactly who the other man was. It was a rare moment when she suddenly found herself standing before the face of God. She charged forward and hugged Jin Woo tightly, whispering that she had missed him too much. Jin Woo finally remembered the terrifying E-rank fairy she had pulled back from earlier and wondered why now. If she plays her hidden mechanics with total focus and picks the perfect runes, she instantly turns into an unstoppable god-tier unit, where her attacks multiply so fast you'd see it all explode. They spent years glued together, leaving him with nowhere left to go and forcing Jin Woo to call him Ramba. Jin Woo remembers being stripped of her title back when the game got messed up during its initial launch. The developers whispered that a massive balance breaker exploit had been spotted, and suddenly Jin Woo vanished from the scene because his team hadn't finished raising the ferry for an entire year. Jin Woo poked at Ramba to see if the quarantine woman had even heard him speak, but the man just stared blankly. Ramba froze with a sudden cry as she watched her body be tossed into a dark, cramped cell where the air grew heavy with fear, leaving no room for her own freedom behind. With her small hands clasped around Jin Woo, she whispered firmly about the bond they share and decided they will never part ways again. It was Jin Woo, and she looked at the person who had locked her up, but as time went on, her mind kept pulling back to protect the secrets, leaving no clear picture of whose hands held the lock. When she tries to remember, her headache feels like an absolute mountain, and Jin Woo figures out the truth is blocked behind a wall that stops anyone from seeing who they are. Jin Woo tells him to tell whatever she remembers, yet she can't even recall it because both were in quarantine. From her words, Jin Woo realizes she wasn't alone in there and asks if anyone else is also held under lockup. She says yes, but lets him know that none of them are all together in the same room. It slipped her mind just now that there were roughly 10 people standing there, 10 summoners who had vanished from their flagging list, exactly like the ones Jin Woo was using right then. Rambo whispers, "That's it." Whenever Jin Woo tear open the scroll, they get a chance to escape the quarantine, because it's been too long since she felt that faint call. The moment he saw him, his mind raced with a wild new idea. Whoever had pulled those X ranks must be the one standing right there. He stares at the ceiling and thinks he might be getting a big prize for solving that difficult puzzle on the 10,000th level of the trial tower. Jin Woo tried to rip off a second spellbook so he could summon a better dragon, but instead he picked up a terrifying giant monkey with an F rank rating. Jin Woo sighs deeply and wonders whether his disappointment really comes from a single reason or if this entire phenomenon proves that the X-rank drop rate is completely unpredictable. Jin Woo's anger is so full of trash that he decides to grind through as many scrolls as possible just to boost his chances at pulling higher X ranks, even though he knows he might soon be stronger than ever before. Jin Woo finally decided to stop calling the god Jinya God and let Ramba know exactly who he is by simply saying Jin Woo's name instead. Ramba asks him why this is, but it turns out to be because 5 emperors have spread their name across the world since then, since Ramba himself has been out for 3 years, and he can't even say exactly how far those gaps are, nor what kind of disadvantage might have happened. The moment his power lets him command the top few stars, nothing stops his fate from turning into an obsession, because everyone wants to know what happens next when they finally master all the high-level games on Earth. Suddenly, the ground shook, and as Jin Woo stared at the dark abyss ahead, the dungeon appeared right before his eyes and told him to move forward to the next stage. He paused in his game and suddenly remembered how strong he really was before. Even though we were playing exactly as they do in real life, this moment feels completely new and strange. But then Jin Woo finds his breathing steady, knowing it's simply another lesson in the training ground. He smiled and stepped forward into the dark room with a new heart full of hope after all this time waiting for him. As Jin Woo stepped into the dark dungeon, a strange chill felt in the air. The system told him that fighting requires a team of summoned friends, but he only had 2, Ramba and the hairy gorilla. He asked the computer if it was ready to add his 2 allies to their team. It's not about maxing out your entire team for every summon. Instead, you should just focus on getting all 5 active so you can clear the dungeon easily. Even if his only summon looks like a risky gamble for a tough fight, Jin Woo thinks the right plan isn't out of reach at all. Jin Woo has been brave enough to face every terrifying dungeon in the world before he knew a single one. Jin Woo decides to start her journey by accepting the challenge because the whole map is perfectly planned in her mind. He accepted the challenge, and when the monster appeared in the distance, it turned out to be a starving gray wolf. The boy was meant to fight the giant wolf and get away from that dangerous cave. A giant shield surrounds him and takes over the fight so that nothing can harm the hero. Jin Woo looks at the game's real-world player protection system and immediately says, "Wow, you really know how to protect people." Even though the man is carefully told he may end up dead if he gets hit without a solid shield, he will fight on. It suddenly struck him with a shock that failure isn't just a mistake. It's the end of everything he had ever planned for himself. Jin Woo sees the wolf's eyes locked onto him and immediately fires his rifle at the approaching gorilla. Jin Woo gasped at how fast the gorilla was moving, only realizing it looked exactly like a turtle. But that didn't stop him from ordering Ramba to make it even faster, so he could feel more confident about his next move. Then Ramba swings her staff hard to make the gorilla move faster, and as soon as the magic hits, the massive beast starts running all over again like it's just playing. The tiger was shocked to find the wolf towering over him. So much so his confidence evaporated and his excitement turned into a sudden slump. No matter how hard he tries, Jin Woo still believes his gorilla cannot ever leave. Jin Woo's brain is juggling numbers and muscles are clashing as they surge toward one another like a battle for dominance. The math in his head gets a lot more complicated when he sees the wolf turn into the gorilla and slam them against the dirt like a bad joke. Jin Woo yells wildly at Ramba, shouting orders for them to pump extra oil into the gun she's holding. Ramba assured him she was swinging so hard she couldn't stop. Ramba's power returns, and the giant lifts his mighty fist high to smash the wolf right in the face, sending him flying. Ramba sees the wolf crash down like a falling leaf and takes advantage of that moment right away. She drops every piece of her treasure into the gorilla to give him that extra shove and a blast of might. The giant gorilla charges hard toward the wolf, slamming his fist against its back with every swing to hurt and scare it away from the rest of the pack. A giant beast falls down with a thud while his rival yells for help as he laughs loudly from above. Jin Woo looks relieved as the wolf is gone, so the game ends for him to celebrate knowing he's finally safe from the dungeon. And Ajin of Jin Woo is quietly watching as she pulls money from her pocket and hands it to a friend standing by the office door. It turned out that after the world had shifted 3 years back, Ajin finally found her own path as a rune farming gamer. Your boss wants you to turn your shiny new items into gold money, so he can buy the best heroes for his team. Ajin stepped forward as her boss made the decision to play the game because of that very accident. She didn't need magic or spells. She just needed a summoner who could find the right ancient tome hidden in a dark dungeon for her own adventure. It turns out she got a C-rank summoner from within this world and feels incredibly lucky because thanks to that powerful ally, she's now making steady cash through farming runes. And she hears that call from Jin Woo right after they stop by the park. She asks him about his discharge status, which turns out to be a completely unrelated problem as he's just being called by someone else for another matter. They told him his dad taught them how to read magic, so when Jin Woo called the woman a vulgar description rather than a real rune farmer, the man got angry and yelled back at her. JYN Woo feels trapped by the rules and can't help but explain that she's trying to do runes for fun, not out of greed. She says, you know, the place with all those glowing screens is right here at the bottom of the screen. After the game went real, players suddenly needed dedicated rooms to keep track of every summon they made, which led to those special zones being created. Basically, no matter how hard players try, nothing else will beat what's happening right above that tower. Ajin and Jin Woo finally met at a cafe, where Ajin told him about everything he didn't know. Then she revealed 2 massive towers had grown from ruins during the game. One was the Jumpsil Tower, and the other the Hyundai Tower. He loves finding his hidden zones, even when every tower feels like a strange foreign land. As the chat keeps going, Ajin asks Jin Woo to tell him which of their summoners are highest up, and Jin answers with a proud, simple E, and an even higher one called F. Ajin gasped when the news hit, then told her brother that he was indeed a lucky man. JYN Woo giggled shyly and said gently that she was absolutely certain of her own opinion, so they could stop the restless chat. Jin Woo decides to tell his sister right away because he needs her immediate help so he can get everything done quickly. Jin Woo steps up and promises a nice lump sum, but it's a surprise that he treats this like an easy win when actually he's been working so hard for her alone. Jin Woo teased his sister about how she'd never know what the future holds if he somehow became the world's greatest player. Ajin drops a heavy stone onto Jin Woo's head, whispering to him that he must only dream of becoming strong, just like one of the 5 true emperors. Ajin insists on telling him that these mighty figures are geniuses and that no ordinary person can ever reach their level. Jin Woo smiled at hearing this, then gently told his sister, "Show me the way to where you want to go. I'd really love to get a real shot in a player zone." Ajin asked Jin Woo on the path to the battle, which turned out to be a wind fairy ride. Jin feels completely stunned as she finally hears the wind fairy's voice for the first time in her life. The old woman tried to call the summoning spell, but was told it would fail after the first glance. So she screamed at her brother for being a total loser because he wasn't actually strangers and wouldn't even finish his ritual properly. Jin Woo agreed but told Ajin to go ahead and show her hand before anyone else does. Ajin happily pulled the summon card out, whispering fiercely to Jin Woo that she couldn't suffer through losing control over her emotions. She sees her own confidence shining as Jin Woo dives deeper into the secret treasure stash, eager to find out exactly where it's hidden. When her summon finally showed up, it turned out to be the C-rank Shadow Elf. Jin Woo felt incredibly bad seeing the situation because his sister scolded him for overreacting. She explained that summon power is actually a very high level of nobility, so Jin Woo had absolutely no excuse to curse or damage her powerful magic. Deep inside Jin Woo's mind, the idea of his sister treating that mysterious shadow elf like a powerful summoning spell can't even sit still. It was only yesterday when he casually activated these kinds of abilities to help gather the group at the fusion lab. Jin Woo asked Ajin whether the shadow elf spoke back at all, yet the question sounded completely useless to them both. Jin Woo's awkward attempt at a friendly greeting turns out to be more embarrassing than she intended. Ajin scolds him for summoning without speaking, which causes the sun to shine on his face as he realizes Ramba can actually talk, a rare thing he had thought was impossible. He didn't realize that being a dumb person meant he couldn't even ask anyone else if they knew how to talk, especially when his boss already had the power to do it for him. As Ajin prepares to hand over the game for him, Jin Woo doesn't agree and claims she'll get it back at a different time, so they wait until it's their turn again. Ajin slammed the door shut as he left, calling Jin Woo out because her promises were never kept. He thinks it's dangerous to let the summoning happen right outside his door tonight. Shortly after they reached the player's territory, Jin Woo landed completely stunned. He didn't remember where the area was. Instead, Ajin told him that big companies had smashed away the old building right after the tower trials came to life. Jean berated her younger brother for refusing to share his usual quiet moments with them, insisting that anyone else wanted to watch the dark drama unfold. Ajin nods proudly at the widescreen, whispering, "This entire bright scene really does make the world feel even bigger with all those adventures and thrills." So a dark dungeon took over the old tower and made the place too big to visit at all. Jin Woo was compelled to face reality and see why everything else felt like a dream. Jin Woo peered at the distant exchange scene and asked Ajin, "Can you tell me all we got?" Ajin replied, "Of course. They can swap entire packs of scrolls, or even runes." This brings back a nostalgic feeling for Jin Woo, because back then, he was always cracking open scrolls and runes with an old friend named Khan, so Ajin showed him a pamphlet containing everything he needed. If he needed a guide, he should head to the information center instead of just hanging out there. Jin Woo's smile makes him look like he already knows everything about the girl he's talking to. Jin Woo plans to take every inch of his power and make his way to the very highest peak. Ajin asks his friend for confirmation before letting him know he's right. She says she's totally free to go now because he'd love to take a look around first. Ajin agreed, though she felt sure her brother had gone completely off the deep end. He was acting like a possessed spirit. As Ajin thought, realizing his brother was only adapting in his own little way, she knew it would be time to stay away from him entirely. She yells at him, reminding him to call her if he ever needs help again. A moment passed as Jin Woo walked alone toward the empty spot, and then called out to Ramba to help him. Jin Woo gently hushed Ramba's loud squeals before she finally let go of the noise. Ramba asks his friend about the trouble, but Jin Woo snaps back, telling him she won't be able to talk out there alone. Jin Woo softly told Ramba not to worry about the noise. She felt a sudden crash of power as she heard it all over again, but his gentle words gave her a moment of peace before the storm finally began. She nods as the door creaks open, whispering that once she speaks with him, he won't let her out until they're all inside a dark dungeon. Once they're all aligned together, Jin Woo recommends they settle down and review where they stand right now. He knew he needed money to really get started on his new life, yet his bank balance felt completely unhelpful. He stared at his own savings, wondering how much was actually there when he should have been rich, and realizing that a part-time job offered no real way to bridge the gap between what he wanted and where he stood. He's not sure if he can ask his parents for money yet. They're already so busy keeping everything else going, and maybe it won't be easy. Jin Woo finally realized his mistake. Asking the guys for a handout wouldn't help because they'd already taken their time. He's not just going to be seen as a parasite if he tries this after all the work they've done for him, so he knows he can get it done again. He had to be the absolute best because his only friend who could help him win all at once was actually the lowest ranking player in the whole league, so everyone knew exactly what to do. And he decided to play hard like a champion, knowing that no matter how much money he earned from a game, he would never let himself stop working toward his goal in life. Oh wow. Just as the doorbell rang and the notification chimed at his screen, a massive notification popped up saying he had received $500,000. What an unbelievable surprise to hear. It felt like a slap in the face because that sudden silence told him how much he had forgotten about getting his hands on the cash. Jin Woo looked through the logs and suddenly saw that the money came from his mother instead of someone he thought was related. As Jin Woo gasps at the sight of her beloved mother's frail body, tears flood his eyes, and he sinks into a moment of profound helplessness, knowing that she gave everything to raise such a strong child in such a difficult way. He spoke with a warm emotion as he thanked his mom, promising that soon enough he could help his family rise from their low points. Jinwoo realized she could have more than 1 year of time on her side, because she couldn't spend another single second wasting away. Jinwoo thinks her escape plan boils down to running through dangerous dungeons to find the raw materials she needs, and that's exactly why the first step in building her team is getting ready. He sprinted over and grabbed a bunch of low-level summoning scrolls right away, hoping to get something special out of the deal. He dropped everything and grabbed the poisonous green lizards at E-rank level to get out of being called total trash. He thinks, with a grin, that beating half the crowd isn't enough when he can force an opponent to stop at just 2 cards while pulling from his own deck. He was clever enough to put a fake smile on his new lizards and say they were harmless, thinking that would make the rest of the group happy, even though the real poison lizard was actually dangerous. He's already got his crew together, and he's determined to keep growing alongside them. Jinwoo believes his path to greatness begins with relentless grinding for runes, endless hunts, and the careful tear of ancient scrolls, all fueled by an unwavering faith that he has already conquered every challenge along the way. The secret weapon in his pack was simply enough to make gathering all those X ranks look like a breeze. He thinks with this idea and decides that finding the highest rank is his main goal. Jinwoo tried to search for a dungeon using the old way, yet the old world isn't quite what he expected. He's digging through a dark dungeon on his phone, and every time he finds something shocking, he jumps up in ecstasy. His sudden panic made him scream like a terrified animal, turning everyone in the room into chaos while they believed he had lost his mind. You know how dragons get stuck in dungeons when they make a bad move? Here, the summoner thinks his spell is okay, but only fails to enter the pit itself. He was holding a phone in his hand when the door at the edge of his room suddenly appeared, and suddenly he found himself inside. And now we see that the rules for a dungeon are much more flexible than they were yesterday. So no matter how easy the dungeon gets, he can only really make it in if he's officially registered as a player. Jinwoo finally lay back and fell into a deep sigh of sorrow as he realized he had no power to stop the sudden shift in the rules. His heart sank knowing he'd been awake for such a long time all along. Seeing that Rambo was upset, he gently gave a big hug to his friend and thanked them for their kind words and heart-to-heart talk. Then his phone rings, and he hears the soft, urgent plea that his mother has already called to ask him when he's coming back home. Jinwoo tells her she doesn't have to worry about fixing his dinner because the task is ready. But instead of leaving her alone, he wants to ask his sister what she thinks about it. And the man in the dark room asked her, "Do you know if anyone is allowed inside?" She tried to reply, but stopped halfway, feeling like her heart was just too small for the question. Jinwoo asked if she had deliberately slipped the secret away from him, yet she bravely claimed she merely meant to forget about it. Jinwoo stood frozen as she pointed out the absurdity of the new rule. Many dead in dungeons were dying because people had been killed there, which forced the government to step in. She asked him to explain why this was so much worse than he thought. Since those who guard the gate are here to keep the door locked, you won't be able to walk in unless someone tells you right before you do. Jinwoo stared at the news and immediately felt like he had walked into a trap. He knew that searching for this information earlier had only made things worse. Now he was stuck in a situation where registration alone could drive the game crash, leaving him wondering if the rule meant to stop everyone from playing because it would eventually ruin the whole system. Ajin explains to his team that a new global ranking system exists where only the top 100 players are listed worldwide every year, leaving Korea completely out of those rankings entirely. Ajin told him that making things reverse direction would be a wonderful idea. Ajin didn't wait long to end the call, as soon as Jin God said something promising. Jinwoo figured out that since everything was all ready, resting on his feet before the day began would have been a much smarter choice. By 6 o'clock in the morning, Kama and Jinwoo had already stepped out of their living room so that the next morning they could get back home quickly. His parents were stunned by seeing him leave home so soon. He wants his mom to tell him to eat a little sooner so she doesn't have to leave early, but Jin says she can't go anywhere without his company. He steps onto the red carpet and immediately turns toward his parents, whispering a long apology that covers up every single moment they've been together. He also thanks them for all the good work they've done so far before. Then he walks away quietly. He smiles with such joy as he hears his dad promise to keep his son safe during those tough times, even though his mom still worries about everything else. The man finally suggested to them that we go on a hike just to get there together, while Jinwoo's mother was stuck praying for her little boy to safely make it back home. In a world where every person becomes a hero, South Korea finally earned fame because its deadly dungeon battles drew so much focus on them. It started when the protagonist became obsessed with money, so he built up an impossible belief that he was actually leading a heroic adventure in a magical fantasy land. The reckless act that nearly sent everyone flying left all those people dead while they were trapped inside the dark dungeons. Since that happened, the foreign media finally decided the top gaming powerhouses are still in the very last place on their charts. It's hard to believe that so much people lost their lives thanks to crazy thoughts, but Jin Woo actually knows exactly that. He isn't a good judge, since he spent 10 years playing video games back then and learned to let himself go if the game got too silly. Later that day, he made it all the way to the office and handed over his game to claim his spot on the team. Jin Woo reaches out and asks the attendant how many players could actually qualify for the game next week. A friendly lady explains that from all the guests coming in for registration, only those who successfully complete their test will earn the honor of being a player. When Jin Woo hears this, he realizes that it is not going to be easy because there are currently over 1,000 people just like him who have come to file their applications. However, Jin Woo believes in his ability to be one of the qualified ones. So if he doesn't make it to the finals, nobody really cares about his past because that's all over now. Jin Woo finally finds himself sitting quietly at the back of the hall, watching people gather around him as their applications are processed. A key person named Park Chang-uk sits right here in a room while his own team fights to keep the qualifications clean as the walls suddenly fall away. Suddenly a panic starts, so Chang-uk rushes to his feet right away to see what's going on. Right as he stepped inside, a terrifying red monster appeared in the hall to fight for revenge against the guy who killed his brothers. Seeing how crazy the situation has become, Chang-uk also pops out his summons, and they all look terrifyingly intimidating. The guy who's attacking them turns out to be from a gang, but Jin Woo didn't even realize it since he kept wearing an earpiece. A moment passed while he turned to find Chong Zak and that crazy guy already locked up in the corner, leaving him completely stunned and bewildered. Some of the civilians inside the room started panicking, though a few still believe Kongik was special because he's known for being tough enough to get rid of all the bad guys just fine. He gasped as he realized the terrifying truth. For years, the city had trusted his elders with their lives, but now they are all being held hostage by these new, shadowy thugs who have turned themselves into summoners ready to fight back. He changed instantly and ordered every person to launch their defensive shields while summoning them up, because there was an urgent crisis at hand. Jin Woo stopped Ramba's cheerful chatter right there, and then, forcing her hand down so she couldn't speak out loud while the crowd watched. The gang member pulls back his hood to reveal an angry orc who taunts Kongik over his fears, while Jin Woo watches from behind the table, secretly refusing to let anyone get close because it's just too painful for him right now. Jin Woo pauses mid-stance and looks around at the crowd before turning his attention to the two opponents, trying not to let his calm break under the sudden heat of the clash. The orc who charged at Chong Shok suddenly froze, realizing that his own fire spell was too dangerous to use against him. So he simply pulled back and watched the warrior summon a new spell with fire in it instead. As the flames finally fade away, the dangerous orc still stands tall and looks as though he's been given a new life by burning himself to death. The gang member laughs as Chong asks if everything is truly up to nothing. Chong's worry isn't fading yet. Instead, he sees a new sign from Jin Woo that tells him the problem is starting to get worse. Jae Woo stares into the darkness as her neighbors scream in panic at the sudden, terrifying movement of Chong Suk, who has suddenly vanished from the path ahead. Jin Woo stood by the door, thinking hard about whether to help or let someone get scouted, feeling his worries making him unsure of what exactly he could do. While he has lost his own thoughts, the orc looms over Chang's summons as he hasn't even finished dying yet. Jin Woo walks up and taps Chongok on the shoulder, making him realize it's dangerous, but Jin Woo refuses and whispers in his ear that the flame turtle isn't where he wants it. The boy knew he needed a spot in front of that red orc and told him to take care of his buffer notes. Jin Woo tells Chung to wait until the moment the fire buffer finally hits, because that exact time means there's absolutely no chance for an attack to succeed. Chung stirs in surprise as he realizes he has been tricked by the fire-dancing orc. Chung Sha ordered his flame turtle to roast every single summon, including those who hold the buffer, and surprisingly, it worked perfectly. Everyone got roasted along with them in one final, delicious meal. The gang member freaks out after Chanik figured out exactly how to trick him away from the trap. He was about to unleash a mighty attack before realizing the game had ended. His summoner power vanished instantly, and his armor broke under the weight of the blow. Realizing the trap was sprung and he was already locked inside, Chongok didn't even realize who had been listening. Instead, he grabbed him by the throat as if a giant tree branch were threatening to swallow him whole, while shouting that everyone must stay silent before he gets what he wants. It was clear when he looked at the gang members now, because they were about to be executed immediately. When tears streamed down his face, he feels suddenly squeezed from the inside, leaving him completely hollowed out. Chong Shok wins with a mighty splash of blood that makes everyone in the hall burst into cheers. Well, Jinwoo knows that killing an idiot isn't exactly his specialty, and seeing a man who looks like they could be on a mission of some kind get brutally killed makes everything feel really weird. Jinwoo stared at the map and felt a heavy ache in his chest, realizing that he had left behind everything he loved back then because he knew the future wasn't going any better than before. You got a tough job ahead. You really got to pull your strength out and do something right. And just as Chang'uk stepped forward to say a nice word of thanks, the scene came to a stop. Jinwoo humbly answers Chang'uk that the matter isn't serious, then asks if he wants to reward him. Chang'uk suggests he should get into his guild first. Jinwoo tells him he's just a beginner with no guild yet, so Chang'uk gets shocked at how easily Jinwoo handled that summon buff without even registering as a player. Then Chang asked Jinwoo if he had his ID because that was all he wanted. When the man said yes, Chang handed over the document without hesitation. Chang told him that once he had run a thorough background check, the money he gets would follow strict rules. Jinwoo smiled warmly as he walked away after hearing the news. Later on, Changshuk called an assistant to check out Jinwoo's stuff and hurry back for her. It was an exciting night at the party. Jinwoo rewarded Ramba by giving him a huge treat right when they were both having fun about what he did well today. At the same moment, Jinwoo thinks no disaster is coming because stepping into a room where everyone else is dead doesn't make sense at all. She knows this plan won't work unless everyone dies anyway. Jinwoo stood up and felt his heart racing because everything was getting so hard right now, which made him decide to pack up all those scrolls and bring on the next level of power immediately before it gets too late. His main focus right now is training his Blast Dragon mages and managing drills for the drill instructors. It turns out these characters aren't normal. They're actually the highest tier heroes in the game. That's when Chang'uk finally realized he was being told a lot of fake news about his idol. Chang'uk wasn't worried about seeing something odd at all. He was just glad that accidents had become part of the usual routine during that early phase of the chaos. It's a shock to hear that Jinwoo actually signed up for player registration right after she got out of bed. Chang snaps Jinwoo's file open, thinking he caught a cap. He's so overwhelmed and has forgotten where he really is. Chang'uk instantly thought about joining the court as a judge for that month. It turns out Chang knew exactly what happened when Jinwoo first woke up. He instantly registered as a player right then, which proves how flexible and ready he really is. Chang'uk is thrilled because he's about to grab a real gym bag from the shelf. The day that was set up for the training actually brought on a massive gathering of people all over the place, exactly as if it happened right before he walked in. The sun finally breaks through the clouds, and Jinwoo stares down at his desk, feeling suddenly trapped behind a wall of pressure so tight it threatens to shatter him when he tries to breathe. No matter what, he never worries about it all since that's really his little game, and nobody knows how much fun he can have playing it. Moments after the program began, Jinwoo gasped in shock upon realizing Chang'uk was already there to evaluate him. Chang'e called Jinwoo into the office just as he was ready to leave. Jinwoo gasped at the news that the man wasn't a judge, but a judge himself. His own joke about fate had turned upside down while Chang'uk teased him for being too smart. Chang'uk asked Jinwoo what he thought after hearing about the training, and Jinwoo paused for a second knowing that all they had learned from the lecture was exactly what he already knew. Jinwoo actually created a clever way for the team to get things done together. Jinwoo finally answered, telling Chang'uk that the training hadn't been all that terrible, though Chang'uk felt a deep resentment beneath his smile. Chong-suk then told him, "I called you in because I saw you pay me a lot for your services." Chang'uk pauses as he asks the old man if he's ready to hear his answer. Does the old guy think Jinwoo might be a pro player? Jinwoo looks bewildered as Chang explains that gamers aren't just people who play games. They're anyone who has played one before it turned real. So if you've ever tried playing a game at all, no matter how short the run is, you automatically get this title. In fact, 70% of Korea's rankers are gamers. It turns out Jinwoo knew exactly how much trouble Chang'uk was in because nobody else knows the secret summon buffs you get when you fight monsters. Jinwoo laughed, knowing his sharp intuition would catch him on that matter later when Chang'uk cheered wildly after his game was ruined and he'd spent 10 years playing it with no players at all. He tweaked his answer with a grin, noting that he'd been playing this game all year long. Even though the rain falls hard, Chang'uk keeps smiling because he knows he's right to feel so impressed by everything. Jinwoo is shocked by the news that Chang has played the game for an entire year, yet Chang refuses to acknowledge the damage she's caused, leaving Jin wondering if he had shot himself in his own foot. Chang pauses in mid-sentence so he can whisper a choice with him. Here are two things to think about, and you decide what feels best. The first way he goes about this is to take control of his own power and grab him right away, so they can both stay in their respective spots. Chok stands up in front of the crowd holding a giant book and shouting, "Yes!" to show everyone that he's ready, while Jinwoo just stares blankly without even blinking once. Jinwoo's eyes widened at the 5 million yuan prize, making both options seem like bad news to everyone on the field, while Chang watched with disbelief because he had already promised Jin Woo the best deal possible. Jin Woo jumps up right in front of Chang, shouting that he's all set for registration without needing to go to HQ first place. But beneath his cheerful exterior, Jin Woo thinks the corporate job is just a piece of trash to get away from his X-rank summons while still running out of time to do anything else. After the meeting with Chang'e, Jin Woo headed straight for the room where he could finally pass his practical exam. The boss shouted, "You ready? Just clear that daily dungeon. You're about to walk into that Twisted Tuesday dungeon where you'll fight for your life with an explosive power move." It turned out that even though Chang didn't really want Jin Woo to take the practical exam, he still arrived at the scene exactly as planned to watch it happen. And yet, Jin Woo knows how to read the world's secrets just like a child needs magic for school. So everyone around her acts like they're 5 years old when things are happening. That moment of clarity happens when Chong Shag finally sees that Jin Woo isn't meant to be discarded like trash. Chong Shaw's hand trembled as he stared at the bite mark on Jin Woo. And for a moment, the silence grew heavy with his own lingering regrets. The official finished his lesson and handed Jin Woo a glowing key, saying, "You're in for a ride." Jin Woo steps into the dark dungeon accompanied by his summoned minions, telling the system exactly what needs to happen. Wipe away those evil slimes who are now taking control of the space. Jinwoo summons Ramba for a serious talk about what's next, and she confidently tells Jin Woo she's already got the plan in place. Ramba instantly boosted the gorilla's strength and momentum for a wild chase. The day turns into a tough challenge because the dungeon isn't designed for easy combat. Instead, you must climb a wall made of slippery monsters just to reach the boss. Even when they wander aimlessly and forget everything about the city, most people still find themselves wandering aimlessly on their own. Jin Woo doesn't want to be a beginner. He wants to catch the slow slimes before they get too big for his eyes. He finally sat down and took a deep breath after conquering this dungeon over and over again until he felt like his muscles had been burned by years of fighting. Jin Woo's big move leads him directly to the deepest cave section, where he finds the most dangerous boss yet, a colossal slime monster that roams the floor with terrifying speed. The gorilla, ordered by his father Jin Woo to hunt for the king slime and then punch him with both hands, finally crushes it down. As Jinwoo stands watching from behind him in pride, it's clear that this specific mission is exactly why he loves Ramba. The powerful attack boost gives her a superpower that lets anyone see their best shot, as if they're already failing. Jin Woo watched a giant bear smash the king slime into the water, but he couldn't figure out how it would work if Ramba's special move also affected other creatures on the battlefield. With the king slime down, he receives a warm message confirming his victory over the boss, and says he cleared the dungeon in 5 minutes. Though Jinwoo finds this short of time surprisingly impressive, since he'd usually finish it in just 1 minute before that moment. Suddenly, hearing about breaking the South Korean record unlocks him an exclusive special achievement. He gets a big bonus for being great at summoning things, but then also gets a lot of gritty grit from the ground below him. In a moment of total panic, Jin Woo stumbles back as the world turns upside down because his latest achievement was something completely impossible to imagine. They found themselves completely stunned by the sudden change in the data, as officials who watched from behind the scenes were all caught off guard. The entire team sat frozen in shock as the news broke that their big recent drop has finally been confirmed. The room went silent instantly as they discovered, with a sudden jolt of surprise, that the person who shattered the record was this unknown stranger named Jin Woo. The shock of a non-rank breaking the record made everyone else jump, and then Chang's story immediately started getting news. At this crucial moment, Chang realizes that Jin Woo is destined to be the nation's premier talent, so he decides to make every effort possible to secure his future. Chang worries hard every day that he can't stop losing Jin Woo if his nation gets caught in a war abroad, but he knows they'll try their best no matter the cost. He ordered his team right away so everyone could check in on Jin Woo without a fuss. He tells us how the world's most powerful people are sorting all the big events from their daily lives. Some are in our own backyard, while others happen across the whole planet simultaneously. Kong was the star boy from Korea and set a new record for how long he could hold his breath. In a race where Jin Woo finally broke the clock and overtook Kong, Rachel was crowned the world leader with only 2 minutes to spare, while the news about her rival's sudden arrival made Chang's team think he deserved a spot on his list of special privileges. When Jin Woo steps out of the darkened dungeon, he's completely flabbergasted by how long 5 minutes feels like when everyone else is just going for a nap right now. And immediately after, Chang'e bursts in and yells, "You've been waiting for me all this time." Jin Woo knew Chang wanted a huge win right now. He told Chang he could break the world record for the first time, but with a loud shout and a determined face, it all came together in one perfect moment. Jin Woo can't even answer right this time. She's nervous because her answer is way behind her friend in quality. Chang handed the keys to his boss, whispering, "You were born with special powers because you proved yourself." Chang'ik pressed Jin for a second, knowing she'd never actually broken anything, and then he simply said something else entirely. Jin Woo pauses his thoughts and stares at the tangled mess of the entire incident, as if he can finally make sense of what happened. He knows that revealing his secret makes South Korea's economy jump straight up in the morning. It's a tough choice when you're running for your life. Either turn the tables and walk away from everything, or get trapped by villains who will tear apart your secrets just like they'll break your heart. As Jin Woo spoke, he gently told Chang'uk that his question was indeed quite rude. Chang'uk admitted that the strategies shared among players were private secrets only for those within his circle. Yet he openly pleaded with South Korea to hire him so he could protect his own secret, while simultaneously helping the nation find a capable leader like himself. From Jin Woo's perspective, he recognized this man as not evil because he had taken on his burden immediately and displayed such an upright character, even though he was quick-witted enough to suggest that using the country instead of Justin would be far more efficient for growth. Jin Woo told Chang that Chang really wanted to move somewhere else instead of staying right here. He walked into the cafe, where the president stood ready to help the nation again. Jin Woo shouted back in a rage as soon as the doctor told him about his 3-year bedridden illness, demanding to know why anyone would want to investigate such an embarrassing detail. Chang apologizes for saying unregistered high leaders can be dangerous, so he did what had to be done. Then Jin Woo asked Chang if they're still investigating him now that he's registered, but Chang lets Chang'uk know he won't want him doing it again. Chang agrees with this, and deep down he's surprised Jin Woo keeps his stance, because most people would have panicked at the mention of the nation. Chang was told by the boy that he is actually very important because Jin Woo knew how to value him well. Jin Woo questions Chang why he feels so powerful in the office, and Chang explains that having more votes means getting more authority. But Jin Woo quickly thinks of him as just a regular politician with no special powers. Jin Woo looks down at Chang and says, "You want your full support in our power? I'm not impressed," before he turns to Chang and starts making a deal. The man smiled when he realized he'd already been registered for 1 month and was ready to grow big with all his backing. Jin Woo promises that if he enjoys his new growth, the team will keep moving forward. But if he stops growing and wants to lose them all, he'll definitely go back and take back every piece of what they've given him or get it in return for something equal. The Chang guy figured out that Jin Woo was secretly working for him to hold his secret job until the end of the month, and the guy wasn't even thinking about it all along. Chang decides to stay near Jin Woo because he sees a clear path forward for himself by getting closer to her. Chong Suk just told Jin Woo nothing about breaking a record when Chang'uk asked him, so Jin Woo wouldn't tell anyone. But Chang had already warned him that they couldn't keep this secret forever because their headquarters is struggling to fight common gangs and protect an asset. Later, Jin Woo walked away happy, knowing he had secured every secret he needed and kept everyone else safe behind the door. As he stepped out, surprise surged because he found himself rewarded with 3 precious summoning scrolls and 2 valuable polishing agents. Jin Woo didn't get mad when someone else broke the record. Instead, he waved his hands and told everyone, "Okay, let's keep playing," because this rule means you only get 1 chance to earn an award for each game. He thought about opening those high-grade scrolls to make some money sound better than selling them. But suddenly he remembers Konga told him that the player web is only for registered players. It's an online marketplace where everyone can trade items. Chang had helped Jin Woo set it up, and now he wonders if this new idea is right or if he should stick with his old plan. Jin Woo immediately began checking her inventory of those high-level summoning scrolls to see how much she could actually raise from them today. It turns out he was completely stunned by the news, because selling so much money means making millions. Jin Woo couldn't help but stare at that absurdity for just 5 minutes in the dungeon before his mind broke under the sheer force of it all. Since stacking bills feels so simple, Jin Woo won't let go until he can finally show his whole family a better way. He decides to sell those advanced scrolls and spend his money on lower-level summoning scrolls because X rank is actually a cheat level for getting low-grade summons, while he can still win big with high-grade ones from the B-grade he already has. Jin Woo sees how rare a low-grade scroll is when its price is actually 5,000 yuan. He stares at the crowded grocery store and wonders why nobody's dropping their prices because everyone else knows they're too expensive. She can't quite make sense of what she's seeing, so she tells him to call Ajin and let her explain how the high-level scrolls are actually bought by their headquarters instead of sold by individual sellers. When Jin Woo asked why, she explained that their team claims the challenge was for top-ranked players to help them outperform others on this specific match. Apparently, the government buys it in bulk with national funds and sets the sale price at 5,000 and one with a daily purchase limit so that everyone can sell directly there. No one wants to lower their prices. Ajin tells Jin Woo that the government might scrap it soon because it's an old policy and the headquarters already has way too much stockpile than they can handle, while Jin Woo grins and thanks Ajin for the information before hanging up. Jin Woo finds himself standing before a man named Chong, who has been swept up in an even more emotional high five than his own. He asked if he could help, but Jin Woo told him he needed just enough low-grade scrolls. Chong laughed and said, "That's it. Just those." Then he pointed to the pile of books on the shelf, saying, "Take what you need." Chong-uk fights hard to hold his breath and keep his heart rate down despite the constant anxiety that the rising numbers are making him nervous. He eventually agrees to do it because the headquarter office is already counting out thousands every single day. Chong-uk warned Jin Woo of his own plan, even though the merchant said he could still make money from selling his items. Chung shook doubts his own ignorance because Jin Woo seems to be trying to plan a game so smart she might actually be thinking about it right now, even though the player isn't playing at all. Jin Woo was convinced his massive scroll job would turn into a grand spectacle, so he figured himself would be the hero of it all. He whispers into her ear that something important is about to happen. Chong must hand over a real secret, so she can use it. He explains that this isn't just about money. He has to pass on information because his job is always for the good of everyone else around him. Maybe relying solely on human help when nothing really happens will actually break their trust. Jin Woo's plan with Su Wei is so clear and straightforward that he can tell everyone exactly why they're doing this. It turns out to be an easy way out of their current dilemma. Although Jin Woo isn't shocked when Chung Zak insists on giving them for free, he can't help but feel that this high-value exchange is worth it. Jin Woo nods in agreement and then immediately shares the news of the new reward with Changuk. Changuk was happy he got the 3 advanced summoning scrolls for each of his dungeons. Jin Woo says you might be able to earn the same points back after someone breaks their record. So playing a relay race where everyone resets and takes turns is actually the fastest way to clear everything and grab that final bonus. So when that action happens, your country will get even higher in its rankings. Chong tells Jin Woo about the top-ranked team who has already started using this technique. So he knows the team can try again and another time even though so many people haven't claimed that prize yet. When Jin Woo reveals the perfect Tuesday dungeon strategy, Chong shock erupts in excitement, realizing exactly what Jin Woo had done to break his first record. Even though Jin knows she wasn't the right move yet, she's just keeping Changuk from doubting her. Jin Woo told Chong that this old tactic works wonders. Using alone lets you finish the Tuesday dungeon in less than 3 minutes. Jin Woo pauses at Chang's surprise and immediately offers a solution. Settle the payment up front so Chong can finish his investigation without delay, then demand extra summons if Chong wants to ask more. Jin Woo felt a deep pull in his chest and began to hesitate before he could say the last words, knowing that every scroll Chong had gathered was worth far more than he could spend alone. Chong shook her the boss, telling the path to lower and upper dungeons is valid, while also noting that those high-level rewards can reach $10 billion each. Chong-gak quickly looked back at Jin Woo, knowing for certain that he was absolutely right. He's asking for a huge discount on the scroll prices, so he lets Jin Woo take the money while Chong-uk guarantees daily deliveries of those cheap scrolls. Jin Woo decided to let Chong-uk know the good news. He won't regret what he did. Later that day, Chong-uk gathered his crew to test out Jin Woo's plan, causing everyone to wonder how he had called his squad just after work. Chong tells everyone that he has a secret treasure he's about to show them, and they get so thrilled by it that they won't even ask him why he'll be calling them without any excuse. He began by announcing that the Tuesday dungeon record had been broken using a strategy he had just received from overseas, though he insisted on testing the new plan with Jin Woo first so they could see how it actually worked before anyone else tried it out. Chong-uk was there only to keep Jin Woo's privacy secret as he had promised earlier. The gullible team instantly believed Chong-uk was right, knowing that being wrong would ruin their plan for spreading the news about Jin Woo. Chong-uk then tells the crowd that all members are set to run Tuesday dungeons, but when he reveals the secret summon monster is actually a small weak lizard, everyone immediately shakes their heads at him. The Komodo dragon is very strong and powerful, but can also take some damage from attacks. The model Komodo is made for high-end displays and used only by the most desperate summons, making it easily ignored as a mere package designed for display rather than actual combat power. It's a game show where the Komodo shows off its giant slime food by throwing the monsters out of the dungeon, which makes the whole place feel like an easy win. After Chong-uk finished his final word on the plan for the group, everyone moved forward one by one as they cleared the darkening dungeon together. The team cheered as they sprinted toward the boss's office, only to find themselves running out of time because the Komodo was eating up every single second. Now that this new strategy is taking hold, everyone starts believing South Korea will eventually break the world record, even though only by tweaking their movement speed with special runes can they make it happen. Now, The very summoner used to be so feared has somehow turned into their personal favorite. It happened just a few days after. Chang'uk decided to pretend to be Jin Woo's glue after reading the article, hoping his first-year gaming career would finally save him from the crushing loss that kept him on the bottom line. So the man who was making mistakes now decided to set up his own group to manage all kinds of stuff involving Jin Woo. He chose Ja, Zhongjin, and Tassop among his teammates to play for him today. Shortly after receiving the promised 150 million, Jian Wu is completely stunned when it turns out making money was just a dream. Meanwhile, Ramba watches the shiny pile of cash and wonders just how many delicious cream buns she can buy with that much gold. Then Jin Woo looked into his bag and found a box filled with 10,000 old, cheap summoning scrolls waiting for him. Chong Sha holds onto that promise of support. So Jin Woo turns his attention to becoming a successful player first by pouring water on the ground and praying to all deities in the sky, while Jin Woo pulls out her X-rank summon. That moment when he tried to summon her had become a very special gift for him after his Jinaga days were over. The ritual ends with a burst of excitement, and Jin Woo's smile spreads across his face as he dives into the pages, tearing open them one by one like a treasure hunt. It felt like an eternity until Jin Woo and Ramba finally gave up their lives and collapsed into a stupor of exhaustion. She opened hundreds of scrolls in 1 hour with nothing to show for it, while Jin Woo lamented how so many useless F-grade papers were just scattered around the room. Ramba laughed, pointing out that X-grades are rare and unlikely to appear this easily. Yet, Jin Woo insisted they should make them happen, reminding her she had already cracked his first attempt. Ramba told him her luck was just pure chance, not the sure thing that it might be. After all, even 10,000 or 100,000 low-grade scrolls could easily fail to summon an X-raid. Jinna looked puzzled and asked, "What does she mean?" Ramba steps in to correct Jack because he sees his master's secret for summoning systems and wants him to learn them right from the start. The speaker tells us that there are many big creatures to come, like how 8 billion humans could easily gather enough horned caterpillars to pull 800 million together. Ramba keeps saying that even though summoning other things feels like buying many coins, true X-grades come in single, rare pieces. Jin Woo stares at Ramba's face with a mix of surprise and horror, wondering why he doesn't know what made these X-grades so special. She insists she knows exactly which summons Jin can summon because there are too many different ones for him to pull on his own. But inside her heart, the math lesson Ramba just taught feels like it's crushing every single possibility of a successful summon. With tens of thousands of types, each averaging 800 million units, pulling one X-grade by chance is going to be nearly impossible. Jin Woo collapses and stumbles to his feet, immediately wondering how many more times he could pull off this amazing run before the lottery finally runs out. Still, Ramba consoles him, explaining that summons with already pulled magical effects won't show up until they're finally sold out. So basically, if all 800 million horned caterpillars have been summoned, then no more horned caterpillars will ever appear in any future summons. Despite feeling powerless against his new challenges, Jimu knows this will only make things harder for him next time. He wonders if opening those mid-grade scrolls could help, yet he instantly changes his mind because they are incredibly inefficient and cost a fortune with no stock available to buy. Jin Woo decides to stay on his low-grade scroll and keep grinding, knowing the odds are against him. Determined to find that 1 in 800 million, he starts tearing through the scrolls, begging the deity of luck to help while Ramba plays his little cheerleader. The days were dragging on like a slow-moving river, and Jin Woo and Ramba had spent the whole week tearing apart the ancient scrolls without making even a single move forward. They had opened the box filled with over 140,000 summoning scrolls without ever finding a single X-grade item inside them. It was so expensive that they even had to pay for a tiny room right next to where the monsters came from in order to finally summon them. Even all the Ramba's minds are fogged up by trying to eat a slice of cream bread. Yet Jin Woo refuses to let go because he can no longer stop leeching from his aging parents. A few moments later, suddenly he woke up Ramba because they needed those useless summoning spells back together, and soon they arrived at the very place where it once was a hotel. It feels as though all these old skyscrapers have been remodeling since the last few years, and now this hotel is finally ready to become a synthesis center. Jin Woo grabs his phone number while Ramba rushes back in to double-check that he's got the right order for making it. Soon, it's their turn, but as they step into the synthesis room, Ramba beams with joy while checking if Jin Woo is ready to begin the work. She stood alone as a handful of empty bags drifted past to help boost her stats. Although these useless spells actually drain his pocket money, he knows that losing them will make him feel worse, so he couldn't help but worry about it. Once the work is finished, Ramba jumps up to rank 21 and gains a little more than she was before. When Jinwoo finally realizes the cost of his last sacrifice, he feels so bitter that even a tiny amount of summoning power feels like nothing to him at all. Ramba flexed those muscles in a desperate attempt to get a compliment from Jinwoo, even though his disappointment was absolute and he knew that raising her max level would take forever, until Chang'uk became surprisingly friendly after secretly building up a special management team for him. Zhang Jin asks why his boss is so thrilled when everyone knows the manager is pouring every ounce of their energy into a brilliant player who could never be underperformed. And it's all because Chang has held such high expectations for him. He asks Zhang Jin what's happening with Jinwoo, while Byong Jin reveals that the character has started gathering summoning scrolls and has already collected even more. Bong Jin insists on telling Chang'uk that even though Jinwoo was already asking for more low-grade scrolls with his 150 million, they won't sell it below market price if the company keeps taking scrolls at such a high rate all at once. Chang'uk stares at the scroll and asks himself why he is taking so much more out of it than usual, despite knowing that the daily rewards are huge. He's convinced something strange happened behind his back, so he snaps and tells Zhang Jin to take the stock down to half the value before they get too involved with the deal. Jin was so stunned by the news that he immediately warned his friend that the extra privileges were a huge deal in disguise. Chang comforts the traveler by saying, "Don't worry about anything. Jinwoo could easily turn into a national hero." Chang was flying high and over the moon, dreaming of how the country would celebrate his success, because all those hard work had been spent just to help someone else win. Because he was so convinced that Zhang Jin followed the rules, Chang'uk finally said, "You must obey me." He pulls back his arm and whispers, "Keep that secret hidden between you two and your team members. Specifically, one is named Ja and the other is called Taeup." In a distant land, Jinwoo and Ramba are still tearing through the scrolls with their hands dirty, making them seem even cheaper than any other thing they can find. He told the man how much longer we had to stay in this place before we could actually die out. It was just then that Jia stepped forward and Ramba instinctively held her hand tight so she wouldn't speak out loud. He smiles when I tell him I brought some special summoning scrolls for this quest. Jinwoo asked if they had agreed on the discount, but instead of moving straight to the point, Ja kept hitting around the bush. Despite trying to be kind and knowing Jinwoo really wanted him to understand how hard she was working to get there, he knew she just needed a simple reason for why it wasn't enough yet. After all the long tale, Ja tells him to offer those scrolls at half price and announces it with pomp as if she were giving a discount on salvation. Yet Jinwoo is surprised by the deal, while Jia drops another bombshell. They're also going to provide an extra 100 million yuan for him. When Jinwoo heard the shocking report, his face turned pale as he told Jia to hold on to that secret so they could move on from the moment. She tells Jinwoo that the amazing rewards come from wanting to make this real together, but he won't tell anyone why she did it so hard for him. As Jia heads back out the door, Jinwoo stares at the map, thinking about how much Chong X has now helped him and why he's ready to stop by. But then reality hits. After a few hours have passed without any real change, Chong X still hasn't moved. Ramba is exhausted, complaining that Jinwoo won't stop him until he summons a big blast dragon mage and asks Hunkayo for help as his drill instructor. Ramba listens to the harsh noises and sees that Jinwoo won't stop until he decides to give up, which means giving up will cost him all his hard work. After Jinwoo is summoned by dozens of useless spells, he starts begging every god in the universe, and suddenly everything pays off as tears fill his eyes. Every scroll he tears brings a brilliant golden light, reminding him that it was just like Ramba's first appearance to everyone. Shocked beyond their minds, the low-grade summoning scroll finally delivers the X-grade blast dragon mage they had wanted. They both cry with joy and celebrate together, but Jin suddenly sees that this lucky streak is hot and might bring even better results for him than before. He tells Ramba that they must keep going because it's still a great ride ahead of them. Ramba feels lost in thought, while Jinwoo steps forward and begins telling him about riding the waves. With his heart hammering against his ribs, Ramba grabs a different scroll and starts to read. And just as he hoped, it actually pulled Hunkayo, the drill instructor, another X-grade summons that Jinwoo has been praying for. Ramba is completely stunned as he starts believing the hot streak might really be happening. Jinwoo collapses with a gasp while looking over at the two figures that have suddenly materialized next to him. Immediately, the scene is alive again. Hungoyo, who's been in quarantine all along, suddenly asks where he is. Hunio was a low-quality summon that never earned the honor of being good at fighting. But Jinwoo knew his real worth wasn't in what he had, but in how much he loved to train every day. Hunkayo's ability to boost everyone else's growth isn't magic. It's just a bonus that works perfectly well when the boss is strong enough, while his charisma makes even weak summons feel like they're winning big too. He finds a new way to grow by learning the teacher's craft, which lets him unlock other summoners' potential and make them even stronger. It turns out the extra power came from getting stronger first, which made Jin Woo soar to lead everyone back when they were young. Although Jin Woo hopes her summons will become more powerful, Ramba refuses to let herself become a tough warrior. As soon as Jin Woo spotted the drill instructor, he immediately recognized the man instantly by the name he had given him to the student. Hugo bowed deeply as he greeted Joanne Woo, hoping it wouldn't be too long since she had been locked away from the world for so long. The girl looks down at the boy with pride, knowing perfectly that those two talents were forged right in front of her. Suddenly, a loud roar blasts through the air as a massive dragon appears and stirs up the floor like water under its feet. Then it turns to ask Jin Woo if she truly knows Jinyagod, but Jin Woo looks surprised because this is actually the first time he has ever heard her voice. The Blast Dragon is a forgotten spellcaster born from a broken heart who never learned to wield his power again. He roams the forest like a lost soul, always looking for the next chance to summon a flame before he's ready to stop. But the ancient Blast Dragon sleeps inside her chest, leaving her a reckless fire damage monster. Her amazing blow isn't just a normal explosion. When unlocked by Hunio's magic, it instantly turns into an unstoppable dragon flame that fires straight at bosses. Blast Dragon was so full of excitement when Jin Woo suddenly realized she wasn't the only one with a secret skill to unlock. She and Jin Woo were the two players who could actually do it. She loved how much they felt like master and god, even though Jin Woo told her he'd been feeling incredibly sorry for missing her too much lately. Hunio and the Blast Dragon nodded in agreement as night fell, but then Jin Woo stepped forward and warned them. They can only speak while no one is nearby, and even then he said he would never call him Jinyagod. When Jin Woo's body finally hit the bed, he instantly drifted into deep sleep as all the summons gathered around him to meet up. Hankyo and Blast Dragon knew each other better than to meet again, so they just caught up casually. Then, when a new friend, Ramba, saw them, he realized how much Hanksho had learned from him. That moment made Ramba's heart beat faster as he remembered that both of them had worked together for a month before parting ways. She tries to show her seniority again because she's been acting so long since Hunio got the job. Hunio lets go of her hand right away, eyes wide with venom as he points out she's overqualified, making everyone else fear the boss before anyone else can speak up. So he grabs the ropes and shouts, "Get in shape if you want to help your master." It was a tough day for Jin Woo because Hungo told him he had to stay up all night watching the stars without sleeping. He turned toward the dragon and said, "I'm ordering you to focus on your mana so you can feel it right away. Then I'll wake up your predatory abilities sometime down the line." The dragon nodded, listening with serious attention as if ready to do something big. And as Hunio turned around to face Ramba, she collapsed into a corner, terrified for her own mind. Hunio says to her that she must train hard with him to make sure her swing is fast. But Ramba stops immediately because a fairy shouldn't be a muscle head. Instead, Hunio asks if she doesn't want to be useful for Jin Woo. Ramba tries to say it's not what she means, but then cuts her off and tells her to start practicing by swinging a frying pan. But when the guy asked her to swing 5,000 times, she nearly launched off into the air and broke. Jin Woo snores loudly as she and Hunio drag her down, leaving the caller completely alone in the dark. At Jia's office in the city center, she quietly explains to Chong Shok that the secret summoning scrolls are now locked behind a strict order from the director, so they can't use them anymore. Chong Shok gasps as the screen flashes with a startling detail. The director isn't looking at the minor issue again. He's demanding a full report on every scroll they've ever used and is now threatening Assemblyman Hisu, who looks like it could be the one behind the scenes. Jia tells Kongik she's got ready all those materials, but they just don't fit her plan against Hisu. Chang'uk starts to shake his head as the clock ticks toward the end of the day. Then suddenly his heart races forward to see if Jin was sent him any urgent news before they can go home. Jia laughs at Chong and asks why Jin Woo is refusing to give him the scrolls, saying she won't need them anymore if Chong isn't getting the one thing she really wants. That moment brought a sudden realization for Chang'uk. He had to finish off the fight against his enemy, Hisu, before he could even start thinking about how to win again. Jin Woo heads to a mountain area to find a normal dungeon, which is one of those 4 common choices: the Tower of Trials, a regular dungeon, a daily dungeon, or even the Chaotic Dragon dungeon. The daily dungeon gathers its materials, but the Tower of Trials has brutal difficulty that pushes you toward your limits. Despite its massive rewards and deadly nature, each encounter comes with a grim reality. The next big boss is Chaos Dragon, a raid dungeon where players must team up to face it. The final boss of the quest is a simple room where Jin Woo must run into. Sometimes these names mean something more fun than a scary dungeon. A few minutes later, Jin Woo steps into the normal dungeon alone and clears out the players with ease because he's an OG player. A newly formed dungeon allows monsters to pour out if left unattended until Jin Woo finally decides to clear quickly. The security insists he enter and has warned him to stay ready. Upon stepping inside, Jin Woo faces a chaotic battle where weapons clash all around him before realizing this is actually a subjugation dungeon. Jin Woo watched as an armored army desperately fought off a horde of orcs before they could break through their defense, making the whole scene feel incredibly real because he had only seen it playing in-game. The action was intense, as the orcs injured 2 soldiers and they panicked for help. Jin Woo felt his heart race with excitement and wonder at what just happened. Realizing the conflict is real, Jin Woo decides to channel his mind into the game and execute what he does best. With that move, he activates a protective shield around himself and summons his entire team, instructing them to prepare for combat. Beyond Ramba, Hungo, and Blast Dragon, he also casts a D-grade Golden Fairy and a D-grade Minong, sacrificing a gorilla to do so. Jin Woo noted that the Golden FY holds the title of the best D-grade healer, whereas Minong stands out as the ultimate D-grade tank. Jin Woo asks Ramba to give Hunkayo a speed buff and Blast Dragon to provide covering fire while Hunio defends behind him, then orders Minong to sprint straight for the orc leader since the battle has ended, because the big boss at the back is dead, making the dungeon surprisingly easy. Minong steps up to Jin Woo and sees a giant orc charging right at his face before he even takes a step away from the mountain. The young warrior's guard is too short for such an attack, so Minong just ducks under the blow and saves himself without dropping his weapon. At the same time, Ramba gives Hunkayo a powerful buff while he cuts through a swarm of orcs in a split second. Jin Woo is puzzled by how well Hunko does. She wonders if his performance is because he was marked as an X-grade summoner. Yet, Jin Woo finds her own satisfaction since Hunko is actually clearing the dungeon faster than anyone expected. The Golden Fairy steps forward and gives Minong a steady hand when the giant orc leader charges him into a fierce fight. The soldiers cheered as they finally found their fighting chance against that powerful ally. Ramba keeps her job going despite the chaos on the battlefield, dodging blasts while she tries to hide from Jin Woo's scolding. She immediately apologizes when an orc throws a weapon at him, but by then the other characters are already ready for action. As they prepare to summon her powerful flames and create a massive wave, Ramba activates it instantly, causing all the orcs in that area to burn over and over until the giant leader realizes he is stuck in a disaster far bigger than anything he can manage on his own. But before he could move, Hunio jumped into the air and delivered one mighty blow, sending his head straight toward a new world where nothing was stopping him anymore. As the team celebrates their first team win, Blast Dragon climbs from level 4 to level 5 and gains an extra point of smartness. And Hankyo does too, only his brain gets a little bigger. Jin Woo receives a valuable intermediate summoning scroll that fetches 500,000 gold. Jin Woo decides to rush back into the dark dungeons because earning that money in 2 minutes is too hard right now, even though Ramba cheers about leveling up and tells him to keep stacking papers like he does best. It's a hard truth that he needs to finish the job before tomorrow starts, and he'll work all night for sure. At headquarters, Chong is staring blankly at a wall of regrets and wondering how he got himself into this mess in the first place. Jia scolded Chang'uk for taking a foolish gamble and asked where he was getting his luck with such an audacious plan. Chang'uk protested, insisting that Hizu had started the scheme, which made him feel compelled to join in. A few moments ago, he was determined to settle the score against Hizu, but fate struck him completely unprepared and left him floored before he even got started. He whispered that he was about to accuse Chang'uk of squandering his own funds on useless stuff all along for nothing. Chang'uk's talents were still too weak for national football to win a trophy. His chest barely touched the floor while Chang'uk tried to scream for help, only to realize that nothing could stop him from standing tall and making a loud protest against the bullying. Hizu couldn't believe his luck when he saw a Tuesday dungeon record break, so Chongshak took it as permission to claim all the power now that the record was up. Chongshak could never fire the ball back because Hizu's training methods are so powerful that they guarantee a win for the whole country every single year. Chang'uk knows Chongshuk is a brat, but still believes he has the power to turn a boast into a national team secret. Now he's ready to make a risky bet to see if someone else can get ahead. Chang'uk agreed with a grin, but Hisu also suggested the loser pay to publicly admit they're inferior and then walk out. In the heat of the moment, Chang'uk agreed and even asked Hizu to sign a deal. Now that he's clear-headed, Chang'uk regrets making such an absurd offer to Jia. Jia wonders if she accepted because Jinwoo was impressive. Yet, despite finding Jinwoo amazing, he is still just another ordinary gamer compared to the current ranked players. Chang'uk whispers sweet words to Jinwoo, so she can focus on her own worries. But she still insists that Chang'ok must give him enough support before he can finally trust his new friend. Meanwhile, Jia keeps feeling cheated by the way Chang'ok seems to be giving her too much credit, and suddenly Taisop bursts into the room, screaming in panic, startling everyone. Jia didn't know what to believe for a while after that moment of doubt, but then something clicked, and she jumped into faith instantly. Chang'ok's eyes sparkled with excitement as he saw that every calculation had truly added up. Jia pecked Jin Woo in the face with a grin that proved he had always been right, while Jin Woo felt like he was holding on to all the money in the universe and checking if it still held more zeros than his lifespan. The news broke that he finally managed to earn a mind-boggling $16 million for 4 straight days. In those 4 days, Jin Woo and his squad took down 14 tough bosses. And that's how much money Jin Woo actually got from selling those dungeon scrolls. Even though Ramba had spent so much blood and sweat to make it happen, he smiled as the world was finally ready for him again. He decided to divide that pile of cash into several separate bank accounts, so he can manage each one independently. It was split into 3 buckets. One went straight to the team, one stayed for our family, and the last kept his own money safe. He decides to spend as much money as possible every single day, each one worth $1,000, to make sure he never runs out of savings for fun. Jin Woo couldn't even imagine wrapping himself in that impossible thought of going from nothing to earning over $10 million every single month without any help at all. He chooses to set up a new bank account specifically for the funds he needs to pay his summons. Even though getting rich might feel like a goal for Jin Woo, he knows that what truly matters right now is having value as a player. So far, the high-level equipment his summon has been running out of mana, which means he decides it's time to equip his summons with runes and enhancements, since they've all surpassed level 30 while clearing several dungeons. You don't need fancy spells. You simply farm these daily dungeons, and Jinwoo tells him that core summons are key for him to finish them up fast. So he dives into the player's massive online shop to find a way to buy those summoning items. But the insane prices there almost send him flying off his own skin. Jin Woo stared at the auction room and realized how ridiculous it was to pay millions just to bump an average C-grade summons up on a B-grade list, while there were no A or S grades in sight, because luck only gave him 1% of a chance each time. Frustrated by the situation, he thought about calling for reinforcements from headquarters instead. At the HQ, Zhang Jin breaks out of Chung Suk's office to announce that Jin Woo just sent a new request. First, Chung Suk felt so eager as he imagined turning on his favorite idol's project. Byong Jin's sudden laugh cuts off the tension as Chung Suk stares in disbelief at the horrifying truth. He has been bought for more than $1 billion. Chung Suk stares at the screen and refuses to trust it, so he decides to ask Zhang Jin once more to double-check if those dark eyes are actually deceiving him. Chang'e couldn't pull his head off the problem because his boss's office never gave his team any special perks at all, so he ended up being held in custody by the very people who should have given him a chance to succeed. Then he asks Bongjin what information Jin Woo is handing over in return for those listed goods. Jin whispered to him how a hidden technique could turn his daily dungeon quests into a massive time travel nightmare. Chang felt that trading with Jin Woo was really brave because they were handing him plenty of pieces instead of just a single, messy bit of news. He stands firm against an insistent press barrage and refuses to back down, yet his belief crumbles when the director snaps at him right before a shot can be fired. Chang'e jumped up in anger after being frustrated by his country's boring schedule, pointing out that no one actually wanted to try anything new because he always did the same. His friend Takup watched this loud display of annoyance with a mix of shock and curiosity as Jia patiently explained everything to him. The girl doesn't feel worried about the rejection since Jin Woo's long list of requests seems to have gotten too overwhelming, so she hopes that maybe more people will get along like Chuanka does. Taio questions Chang'e about what the director said, but Chang'e tells him that the director only needs proof that Jin Woo is able to clear the dungeons. The trouble with Jin Woo is that he can't get those powerful summon spells without them. Jia believed it was a huge jackpot if he knew that Jin Woo could clear every single dungeon on the day after tomorrow. Chung Zok sees the brass hats as too stupid to recognize Jin Woo's real power. Yet Jia tells him that what Jin Woo actually wants is only a tiny amount of money compared to the huge sum he is ready to give. Chung Zok can't believe his ears when hearing that over $1 billion is not even chicken change. Then Jia steps forward and offers the funds instead, leaving everyone stunned. That moment made Chung realize Jia's life lived far away in a way that wasn't like his own. Apparently, Jia is Jia's 4th granddaughter of Daeon Group, South Korea's top conglomerate, so she got her golden spoon and best education from the money that can give. But instead of trying to manage her own business, she let it go because she was more interested in playing. And right now, the player she knows for most is not other than Jin Woo, who has too much knowledge just for a beginner. Jia noticed that even when Jin Woo could boldly talk to everyone in her country, still something stood out about her approach. Jia was so inspired by all that was happening around him that he suddenly felt compelled to create his own one-man talent agency for Jin Woo. She wants to give her investment to him so she can get paid for his secrets, but that means the company won't be tied up in the big office anymore and will start all over again. Jia looks puzzled when the question comes back to her. Are you really sure about spending that kind of money? Chong felt so stupid when she reminded him of how much more money was at the bank than anything else, because he had never asked any real questions about it before. Jia tells Jin Woo the hard truth. The financial relationship doesn't matter when they finally decide on her future together. The next morning, Jia gathered with Jin Woo at an upscale dining spot to start their lunch date. Jin Woo walked into his new HQ and instantly received 5-star treatment, feeling as though the office was giving him a very royal treat. When Jia sent him a message earlier asking if he could meet regarding his request for the answer, he was genuinely surprised that they would make up their minds so quickly about what he sees as a tiny piece of information. Despite this surprise and feeling uneasy about not being someone easy to negotiate with, he still hopes it won't be too late. She did something really crazy while she was here, making Jin Woo finally make it to a place that feels like the most insane hotel in town. When the doctor walked away, feeling completely lost and strange, he felt exactly as if he were a puzzle that didn't belong in this world. He felt so happy because the person he loved gave him a lot of information. When Jinwoo meets Jia for the first time, he suddenly feels a rush of pressure because his heart had been racing since seeing her, and what she saw almost made him fly away. She looks like someone who has all the best things in the world, but is still stuck working a boring job at HQ. Gina clapped her hands and said, Jinwoo looks absolutely stunned by the fact that I'm standing here alone. Jia broke the news of her new business deal to Jinwoo just as they sat down for dinner. She told him that instead of working with the big corporate HQ, the company was now operating under her own hands and feet. As usual, she tries to play the emotional card to let Jinwoo know how much effort they put into helping him. He looked surprised when he found a new chance up his sleeve. She tells him she's going to set up a special team just for him. Jinwoo pauses before accepting D-Song's offer because their relentless focus on making money makes them look too much like the overly bureaucratic headquarters where everyone waits for approval. But he knows Daesong could actually supply him with exactly the kind of profit he needs. Jinwoo desperately wants a rare resource to upgrade his gear because he has no choice but to pay the most for it right now, ensuring he keeps getting new materials all along. Jia listened intently when he hesitated, then proudly listed the advantages of her services, promising him a safe and supportive home without any hidden costs. Jinwoo, who was stunned by the offer, immediately believed it because financial promises never go to waste. Jinwoo starts being a bit sweet and inviting, which makes Jia feel like she's about to receive some genuine praise. She sees them all aligned and decides to dive straight into her plan next week, promising to drop by right away to seal the contract before it happens. Zhao suddenly notices that Jinwoo hasn't even finished signing the contract before he asks him to verify the summon request, so he finds himself completely baffled by the lack of any official paperwork. However, Jia laughs softly because she's already planning out whether he'll sign that contract or treat him as a special gift, and when Jinwoo watches, the sheer size of his proposed deal makes it look like giving someone something worth more than their entire empire without even needing to check a single eye. That very next morning, Ajin went after Jinwoo to find out why they were totally disconnected over the years. She watched him walk into the new spot and wondered just what had happened before that moment. As soon as Jia walked past, Ajin was so spellbound she didn't even see how far she had gone until she realized she looked exactly like a girl she'd seen before. Ajin stutters for a moment before her mind finally snaps back to where the picture was like a quiet storm clearing out of the fog. As the minutes ticked out of her time, her jaw dropped to reveal exactly who she was just before. At the same time, Jinwoo workouts as Hunko grind summons until they become the dream team. Suddenly, a loud voice from behind called out for him to halt, but his heart raced as he quietly told everyone else to stay quiet first. Jia's arrival brings the whole team together for the final rest. It's late tonight when Jinwoo finally starts up early again, but his calls just keep echoing from earlier days until this morning when he suddenly stands motionless on his porch without a single word to say. She steps forward and notices that she has never seen anyone like him before. The young master told the girl she was his core squad, promising a big reveal before the game began, so he sprinted over and ordered the match to take place in the gymnasium instead. After they part ways, Jia hands over that promise to JYN, and JYN takes it back as a beautiful, tangible exchange instead of just words. Jinwoo remembers the game worked just like this, letting players buy, sell, or exchange items with prices anyone could talk about. As long as an agreement lands, everyone wins the deal. But suddenly, a system scolds and kills any player who tries to cheat another one. Jin Woo checks out Ja's summons on her list and is shocked that she actually found all the stuff there. He quickly agrees to the trade and happily thanks Ja for such a great gift, which she says isn't really hers at all. She hands the contract to Jin Woo and asks if they'd like to talk about what's in it. Then Jia says the new company's name will be Yubeck, a mix of their last names. The deal is simple. She hands over half her stake and keeps the rest, leaving the other half to be shared with Konik. Jin Woo is stunned because she just heard that Chanuk stays at HQ to keep the team moving, while his friends Tasio and Jongjin get ready to take off for a new job right away. Ja laughs and says, "We've already stepped down happy after you gave us 3 times what we owed." Jin Woo pauses before accepting the offer because he worries that taking so many shares might feel like giving Jia too much power. Gaia guarantees he knows exactly what to do, so she can make sure every bit of her 25% goes toward getting him a big deal. So, besides not worrying about voting rights, that's all because the company is run by her alone. Gina decided to hand over all those shares so the company can grow and help everyone connect, since building a strong bond between partners is truly the biggest goal of any successful business. Jin Woo finally agreed to her terms and signed a contract, making her incredibly happy. Then, with a big smile on her face, she and he sealed the deal right now, so they could plan their magic together. Suddenly, Hungo leaps out of the bushes as if he can smell something dangerous moving near him. A few seconds later, he stumbled out, pulling Ajin and her shadow summoned by the legs like meat for slaughter toward the bushes where Jin Woo was stunned to see him. Though Ajin wasn't quite ready to recover yet after being captured by Hung's stealth tactics. As Jia fades away, Jin Woo rushes over to ask Ajin what's wrong with her because she seems so busy hiding somewhere else in the crowd. Jin Woo steps in between the two girls, trying to coax Ajin away from Jia by pointing out how strange it feels to be followed after seeing someone you care about. But as they argue over who is creepy and who just wants curiosity, Jin quickly realizes that their secret follow-up isn't actually stalking. It's just a girl who loves being seen right up close. Jin Woo asked herself why she had chosen to spy over simply revealing her existence. As she watched Ajin refuse to lie about his true intentions, she decided to activate a special ability that forced him to speak directly to the truth for the first time in years. Ajin screams with rage as she realizes she cannot hide any longer and suddenly begins her mission to catch the man who betrayed her. Then she seized the moment with reckless speed and demanded to learn exactly where her brother's secrets are hiding. She dropped his dozen questions into the air right as he took one last deep breath, leaving no room for him to calm down before he shouted back at her. As Jiao walked away, she turned to Ajin and smiled, feeling exactly as if she had finally completed every wish of her entire life. However, Jiao wasn't staying for very long because she hoped to meet Jin Woo's family later, since the contract lets them talk about their upcoming deal. Ajin keeps trying to make Jin Woo feel like his friends are still there while pretending to be crying, so the drama gets a little better. Finally, Yun Woo let go of all resistance and shared the juicy details. He was a famous online gamer and told her about his incredible record-breaking dungeon runs, including the time he met his friend Jia inside the building's main office. Gina wonders why Jin Woo keeps playing this game so hard, wondering if it is actually the same summoning battle she used in the past. Jin Woo immediately said she didn't realize the game had changed completely, and she was sure she was just playing again. He lied to Ajin about his long battle with summoners, claiming he had only fought for roughly a year simply because he didn't want to show anyone that he was actually the legendary Jinna god. Even though the situation was incredibly frustrating and bad, Ajin didn't give up. He was so excited about playing that game that he managed to keep it going until the entire season ended in trouble after just 1 year of being on the field. She nudged him proudly, pointing out how his game-obsessed life had finally paid off. Jin Woo hesitates before bursting out with the truth so that his sister doesn't get hurt. Jin Woo refused to let his sick family drag him down into such heavy complications during those 3 crucial months of his coma, knowing that staying close would only hurt more than it could help. He decided first that protecting his friends was more important than trying to erase their name, so he had to grow strong enough to keep them safe. Jin Woo explains why Ajin is hiding this news, promising to share details with his family after the story ends so they can finally understand who they are. Jin Woo watched as Ajin's summons drifted lazily through the crowd, looking like an irritating fly that kept everyone from breathing down their necks. Hunko felt frustrated as he tried to grab the cursed item. Yet Jin Woo intervened by asking why the dark elf had suddenly snapped its fingers and acted strangely around him. He tells her to summon a shadow wolf and mix it with an elf so that the dark elf won't become a dull waste of mind. Ajin gasped as her mind raced through the memories of her own childhood when she first saw a shadow wolf emerge from the woods, realizing that nothing in the world was ever prepared for such an unexpected and terrifying sight. Jin Woo keeps whispering to Ajin. It turns out this summons is just a low-budget version of a legendary one, while the elder pondered why her boss had summoned such an inferior creature. The shopkeeper pointed a finger at the flea market stall, where a merchant shouted up loud that the item cost a ridiculous amount for such an old leather coat. She stared at him, then glanced back over her shoulder, realizing how absurd it all was before she just laughed out loud. Ajin asked Jin Woo if she really thinks she can earn 500 million in just 20 years, and how that crazy plan is actually going to pay off for her. Jin Woo smiled brightly as he assured her she'd have the job in time for next month. She laughed so hard that she refused to let her boss know he was exaggerating everything. The girl tells him to stop acting cool, knowing he's a gamer who only played for a year and hasn't seen the true powers yet. Then, Ajin explains that she will pay her own way in saving up just for this special shadow wolf. Jin Woo stands tall as a hero, standing before the girl to tell her not to gag while he hands her the sword later. He pulls away from the crowd as the summons fades, and while her brother walks confidently away, Ajin notices how he seems to be walking on his own now. However, she can't quite grab the object, and her shadow elf, once a scary monster, is now just a tiny mosquito with a heart full of worry. Yet Ajin knows for sure his brother has turned into someone totally different. A week after the final battle, Jin Woo's new team has finally moved his beloved character into a completely different and terrifying dungeon. He puts on a new vest, and Jia tells him that wearing it for everyday dungeon run makes all the difference. She says Yup's first product is to sell clear video files for a high-end fee. She holds up her high-tech vest, saying it's packed full of cameras so she can watch everything in real time. Jimu heard Jia say the vest was very light and didn't want it to block any of those important missions. After helping him get ready for his adventure, the group began to complain about every inch of the disguise, sending glowing smiles at Jin Woo that made her feel far less welcome and much more uneasy as she stepped into the dark depths of the dungeon. Jin Woo stands ready for the dungeon entrance when he tells Jia it is his very first time in this Monday's special session. He wonders if she cares about not being able to keep the studio clean, but Jia just reassures him that everything will be edited out as long as they pick only the best bit from what they've got. He stops in his tracks and slowly says, "Did I just go over a new record?" as she watches him with wide eyes, unsure whether this was a mistake or an achievement. Jia is stunned when asked to help, but she remains puzzled since he only mentioned it wasn't going to be a smooth dungeon run. She told him to take a deep breath and let her mind wander while doing exactly what he wants. Jin Woo stepped into confidence, knowing he could smash the national record by nearly breaking 7 minutes of time on Monday's dungeon crawl. The first dungeon in the story is called Monday Dungeon. It's the only place where you can get a new rune by using an attack, but if your clearing time gets too long, you lose that chance to earn one. So the Battle of Summoners isn't just about magic spells. Actually, you can't even get started without them. That's why these powerful weapons are known as attack runes. Jin Woo noticed that the Monday Dungeon was actually a battle arena where he had to stand still against thousands of undead monsters for 30 straight minutes. But clearing that last bit of time really counts for your spot at the top. So you just have to beat the final boss, the Lich, in no time. So when that enemy finally comes, targeting them becomes a standard plan, and Jin Woo immediately pauses to verify his gear is ready before selecting his squad. He put together 3 brave boys and gave each one a special job to make the whole mission work perfectly. Jin Woo's squad made a tough decision by keeping X-Grade Hungo, the combat sheriff, and Minong as their main team, while relegating the 3 low-quality summoners to their final spots, Priest of Radiance, Golden Fairy, and the rest of the group. A system message snaps Jin Woo's guard as a massive army of undead mobs rushes toward his camp, forcing him to stand firmly in place while waiting for help to reach his side. The 30-minute countdown starts as Jinwoo's team launches their attack, with Minong leading the charge. As Minikong cuts through the initial swarm of enemies, Jin Woo and his allies rush forward to catch up before the tide turns. He's been asked by Jin Woo to climb the mountains so they can see a better view of the future, and it turns out that being smarter than anyone else means you actually know what's happening right now. A fierce battle broke out as Jin Woo and her team sprinted toward the summit in less than 20 seconds. Hugo slices through the undead with a butter-like speed, and Minong slashes them away using raw power, leaving Jin Woo utterly stunned by how effortlessly they crushed everything before him. Jin Woo whispers that she's told the combat sheriff to prepare for what comes next. Well, the combat sheriff is a beast who swings his spear far and wide, yet nobody actually used him for those long-range attacks, since he shoots little damage at all. But now Jin Woo decides to take advantage of it, because that Lich just can't hold off with even a tiny amount of health. Jin Woo pauses before shooting the gun because the sheriff needs to see his last move. Then Radiant casts her blessing skill immediately, and instantly the Lich loses his dark shield spell. Jin Woo realized the shield was gone and immediately shouted his way through the crowd, telling the sheriff to fire on them. So as Miniskin shreds away at the undead, she's right here casting a spell on Radiant just before they get trapped together. The sheriff fires a few rounds, and the big creature simply shrinks down so hard he can't move anymore. It's strange that Jin Woo doesn't feel a bit disappointed when he sees the crowd so loud with their excitement. And yet, even when the bullets are all hitting it, the Lich's health isn't disappearing. Instead, its HP is quietly shrinking as each powerful strike lands on him. So the players think their weak runes make this game-breaking method so useless that they completely steer clear of it. But to them, there's nothing more valuable than a strong spell like Jin Woo's. A zombie lunging for Jin Woo's head while his drill instructor dives in to stop the beast. Jin Woo and his summoned troops finally crushed the mighty boss monster by working together with perfect skill and solid tactics. He cleared the dark dungeon in 4 quick minutes, setting a world record pace while Jia and her team watched from afar to keep an eye on whatever was unfolding out there. Jia didn't wait for a miracle. She only expected Jin Woo to do something he'd promised himself after weeks of waiting. Even though Jia says she won't back down, the entire team still stands by her side whenever things get tough. Byong Jin then asks her if she thinks Jin Woo would be able to break all the daily dungeon records. Jia